Yeah, we're going to be doing the top 5 problems on the second generation Ford Explorer. Let's join it in. Number 1, yeah, you guessed it, Ford. Blend door. Not the actuator, but the actual blend door. It cracks, and I'm going to show you where it's located here on the passenger side, behind the glove box. So you just grab the glove box, make sure it's empty, because the stuff will fall on the floor. Open it up, and there is the actual actuator. But in order to do this job, this whole heater box has to come out, and we're talking about removing the dash, everything here, and it takes about 8 hours. But what happens is that blend door sits on that pinnacle, and it goes down inside this box, and it flaps open and close for hot and cold. That actuator actually does its job, but the tubing that it goes into for the actual blend door cracks open. When it cracks open, the module here, the actuator, spins, but the blend door is frozen usually. It's always stuck in the hot position. So yeah, if you don't want heat, you're gonna get it. Number 2. Now, if you own a Ford, you've probably heard this noise. It's the timing chain, and they call it the timing chain cassette. That's what Ford calls it. I call it a timing chain guide. So it's basically the plastic piece. It's aluminum or metal with a plastic coating on it that keeps that chain taut from the top cam to the crank, and it stops it from moving. Well, the plastic gets all brittle and falls apart from the petroleum in the oil, and then it shatters. It goes down that oil pan. Sometimes you'll do an oil change, and you'll be like, what is this coming out of this oil pan? Well, it's the timing chain guide, or the cassette, which is what they want to call it. And yeah, it gives a chatter. You hear it in the noise. Basically up here on the front end, it's behind the water pump. You hear this click, 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 click. And you know, it's not good because it's going to break and it's going to skip a tooth. And if it does skip a tooth, it should be fine on the V6s or the V8s on these Fords. They're overhead cams, so they're not interference engine. So you should be fine. But don't prolong it, get it fixed. Number 3, yep, you guessed it. That's not rain, that's trainee fluid. Dripping right out of that pan, and that's what it's known for. Fluid drips out of the transmission, updates on the computer, a shudder or a lack of shifting properly, all the problems in these transmissions on these Fords. And this one is pretty obvious. We got some major leaks here. And that's one of the problems that they find with this, top 5. No matter how much you seal it, it's going to come back leaking again and again. Number 4, well, this one particularly has an aluminum upper intake. And that is where the problem starts. That gasket between the lower intake and the upper intake, you know, it starts to shred and breaks out. And little pieces will actually stick out of where they join. You can see where the 2 pieces will join down here. Paper gasket kind of just pops out. You'll hear a shh sound and you'll get an engine light, and it will be rough idle as anything, especially when it's cold. The colder it is, the more it's going to run rough. And that's what it is. Take a quick look. Make sure you hear that shushing sound. Sounds like a vacuum leak. And take your light and look over here. You'll probably find a piece of gasket sticking out. So the upper intake gasket is leaking like a sieve. Number 5, yeah, you guessed it. I saved the best for last. Plastic intake. Ford was notorious for this during this time, where they had a plastic intake that would just crack and all the coolant would just pour out. And you're like, what? But if you're stuck on the highway or you're going to high-end speeds, boy, your temp gauge shot right up and you could have seized your engine if you weren't paying attention. Yeah, they knew about it and they actually fixed it. They put a crossover aluminum pipe on that lower end. And so hopefully you got that. So that concludes our top 5 problems we found with the second generation Ford Explorer. Don't forget to subscribe and ring that bell, because then it sends off all notifications so you won't miss any future videos. Thanks. And this one is located in the driver's, nope, Ford Explorer. Please subscribe. Misshifting, we have to do it again. What unbelievable.